It was an early morning in the Bavarian Alps, cold and quiet, just like any other November day. A woman was driving along a secluded road near a village when something unusual caught her attention. In the middle of the road lay a shape that clearly did not belong there. As she approached, her heart sank. There, on the wet pavement, was the body of a woman. She was nearly naked, covered in bruises, and unmistakably lifeless. This was no accident. Someone had deliberately done this. There was no identification, no phone, not even any clothing to indicate who she was. As the police began to investigate, they quickly realized this was just the start of a dark and intricate tale filled with secrets, lies, and a shocking betrayal that no one could have anticipated. Francofontana is a charming town located in the Brindisi province of Italy's Apulia region. Here, 34-year-old Francesco Alfonsetti appeared to lead a stable and respected life. He worked as a surveyor, was married, and had 3 children. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues viewed him as a devoted family man, someone who returned home from frequent work trips to fully engage in his role as a father and husband. He proudly portrayed himself as someone who cherished family life. However, beneath this carefully crafted facade, Francesco harbored a secret that would eventually shatter lives. For 3 years, he had been secretly engaged to a 22-year-old dentistry student named Eleonora. Young, intelligent, and deeply in love, Eleonora lived in a quiet town near Pescara in the Abruzzo region. She was the only daughter of a well-off family. Her mother, Elizabeth, a Dutch jewelry dealer, worked primarily in southern Italy, while her father, an Italian engineer, was based in Venice. Although her parents lived apart due to their careers, they remained involved in their daughter's life. Francesco had become a regular presence in Eleonora's world, joining family dinners and weekend visits, treated as a future son-in-law. Everything seemed normal during a family dinner in May 2001, until Eleonora's father casually asked, "When's the wedding?" Francesco appeared briefly tense before politely responding that it would be after Eleonora finished her studies. The moment passed without further comment, and no one at that table knew he was living a double life. Months later, in late October, Eleonora arrived at her mother Elizabeth's apartment. It was quiet and the doorbell went unanswered, which was not unusual. Using her own key, she entered to find something that stopped her in her tracks. On the table lay a single envelope with her name written in her mother's familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter in which Elizabeth expressed her intention to leave everything behind, her life, her home, and even her daughter, to start anew elsewhere. She spoke of love, regret, and the need for space, but provided no clear reason for her decision. There were no hints about where she had gone or when she had left. She had simply vanished. Panic set in quickly. Eleonora tried calling her mother's mobile phone, only to find it unreachable. She then contacted her father in Venice, who was equally stunned. He assured her there had been no argument or confrontation, although he admitted that Elizabeth had often expressed dissatisfaction with their long-distance arrangement. Still, he never expected something like this. Could she have been seeing someone else? Both father and daughter dismissed the thought. Elizabeth had always been open with her daughter, and such a secret seemed unthinkable. As they searched for rational explanations, one idea emerged. Perhaps this was an act of protest, a dramatic way for Elizabeth to express her frustration with her situation. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the silence became unbearable. Desperate, Eleonora turned to the one person she trusted most, her fiancé, Francesco. He listened patiently and offered soothing words, insisting it was likely a temporary reaction and that Elizabeth would return once her emotions cooled. But she didn't come back. No calls, no notes, no signs. What began as a strange disappearance soon felt like something far more serious, something darker. Then Eleonora received a postcard from her mother. It was from Austria. Despite the postcard, Eleonora couldn't find peace. The brief message, signed with her mother's name and lacking any real explanation, only deepened her confusion. Why had Elizabeth chosen to vanish without warning? Why send a postcard instead of calling or writing a proper letter? It didn't feel like the actions of someone simply seeking space. It felt colder, more detached, almost as if someone else had written it. Francesco remained by Eleonora's side, providing the unwavering support expected from a devoted fiancé. He comforted her through the long, sleepless nights. But beneath her grief, a deeper fear began to take root. Something was wrong. Her instincts told her that her mother's disappearance was not the spontaneous decision of an overwhelmed woman. It was something else, something far more sinister. Meanwhile, in southern Germany, hundreds of miles away, a scene was unfolding that would send shockwaves through the region. On the morning of November 6, 2001, a local woman was driving along a remote road in the quiet alpine stretch. It was early, and the road was wet from the night's rain when she noticed something unusual ahead. At first, she couldn't tell what it was, just a vague, oddly shaped form on the asphalt. But as she drew nearer, horror gripped her. Lying motionless in the center of the road was the body of a woman. She was nearly naked, dressed only in underwear, and her body was covered in blood. The scene was nightmarish. Visible bruises adorned her wrists and arms, clear signs that she had fought desperately before being overpowered. Her face was so mutilated that it was impossible to discern her features. Investigators arrived quickly. It was immediately clear that this was no ordinary hit and run. The woman had been brutally beaten unconscious and then deliberately run over several times. Whoever had done this hadn't simply tried to kill her. They had tried to erase her. A pair of earrings lay near the body, but no other belongings were found. No purse, no ID, no clothes. It was evident that the killer had made a calculated effort to delay identification. But the earrings suggested a rush job. Perhaps they had planned to take them too, but were forced to flee. That same day, an autopsy was conducted. The forensic team estimated that the victim was between 25 and 30 years old. The cause of death was determined to be internal bleeding due to massive trauma to her organs. The injuries were consistent with being repeatedly run over. She had died only hours before her body was discovered. The examination also revealed that she had been sexually active shortly before her death, though whether it was consensual could not be confirmed. There were no clear signs of assault, but the possibility remained open. Another key detail emerged. The woman had previously been pregnant and had given birth at least once. These biological markers provided investigators with a small thread to pull on, but they needed more. More testing was ordered. It would take time, but time was something they were willing to invest. Then came a breakthrough. That very morning, a passerby walking nearly 30 meters from where the body was discovered noticed a plastic bag discarded along the riverbank. Inside were women's clothing. Something about it felt off, prompting the individual to contact the local police. Investigators were alerted and took possession of the items. What they found matched their suspicions. The bra found in the bag was from the same lingerie set the woman had been wearing. Every piece of clothing, labels, sizes, style, belonged to the same person. The labels were Italian, suggesting the victim had some connection to Italy, if not Italian citizenship herself. The criminal police quickly established a special investigative commission. Their first objective was to identify the victim. Authorities combed through every active missing persons report in Germany and Italy. When that search yielded nothing, they widened their scope, ultimately checking databases in 48 countries. Still, no match. It was as if this woman had vanished from the earth without a trace. No record, no missing report, no identity. Despite the lack of leads, investigators remained determined. The DNA sample recovered from beneath the victim's fingernails, likely scraped during her violent struggle, was promising. It indicated that she had fought back and that her killer had left behind a trace. But that glimmer of hope quickly faded. The DNA yielded no match in national or international databases. Whoever had committed this crime was not in the system. Weeks turned into months, and the victim's identity remained a mystery. With no missing persons reports matching her description, investigators found themselves at a standstill. The faceless woman was becoming more than just an unsolved case. She was a haunting presence, a reminder of how someone could simply vanish from the world without a trace. Amid the mounting frustration, investigators began to question everything, including the original forensic assessment. Had the age estimate been wrong? A second analysis was ordered. This time, the forensic specialist suggested that the woman was not in her 20s or early 30s, but closer to 45. It was a significant shift. Yet, even this updated estimate failed to open any doors. Missing persons reports continued to turn up empty. In an effort to reignite public interest, authorities commissioned a full facial reconstruction of the woman. A post-mortem image was carefully crafted based on the structure of her skull. The likeness was then broadcast across both German and Italian media, featured in newspapers and on popular crime television programs. The hope was simple. Someone, somewhere, would recognize her. No one did. 9 months after the body had been found, in August 2002, the Special Investigative Commission was officially dissolved. The case was passed on to a team of just 3 officers. Though the workload was heavy and the trail cold, they couldn't let go of the woman who had come to occupy their thoughts daily. She was well-groomed, her clothing was expensive, and she had likely lived a comfortable life. So why had no one come forward to claim her? No family, no friends, no colleagues. Despite everything, the 3 investigators pressed on. They turned their focus to what they still had: her clothing. In particular, the jacket she had worn stood out. It wasn't mass-produced. The label indicated it had come from a small Italian fashion line. Through careful digging, the officers discovered that only 14 jackets had ever been made with that specific label and design. But getting answers wouldn't be easy. The Italian company that manufactured the jacket refused to share customer records. For German investigators to access those files, they needed a search warrant, and without jurisdiction in Italy, they had no legal authority to obtain one. The Italian police, who had become somewhat involved in the case, didn't see the jacket as a priority and declined to act on it. Still, the Germans refused to give up. Through international legal cooperation channels, they submitted a formal request for assistance to the Italian judiciary. When the first request went unanswered, they submitted another, and then another. A full year passed with no response. But finally, in late October 2003, a breakthrough came. The Italian authorities granted the warrant. Police descended on the company's headquarters. Investigators waited anxiously. Inside the building, Italian officers requested all documentation related to the sale of those 14 jackets. They learned that the jackets had initially been displayed at a fashion show. Afterwards, they were returned to the company and then sold to retail stores, but the company had kept no receipts. No records showed where the jackets were distributed or who purchased them. It was another crushing disappointment. Weeks went by, and the momentum faded. But then, out of nowhere, a single phone call changed everything. An employee of the fashion company had been watching a true crime segment on Italian TV. When the image of the jacket appeared, she recognized the label. She remembered that 9 of the jackets had been sent to a boutique in Bologna. She couldn't recall where the remaining 6 had gone, but this was something, a lead. The German team acted quickly, relaying the tip to their Italian counterparts. Police in Bologna tracked down the boutique and pulled the sales records. 7 jackets had been paid for in cash, an investigative dead end. But 2 had been purchased with credit cards. It wasn't much, but it was the closest they had come to identifying their Jane Doe. If one of those cards belonged to the victim, the mystery might finally be broken open. And this time, everything began to move fast. The cardholder data was obtained, and the names were traced. Investigators in both Germany and Italy held their breath. They were about to find out if one of those names would finally bring identity to the woman who had died alone, discarded in the dark on a cold alpine road. One of the buyers was a man from Sardinia, quickly ruled out. The other was Elizabeth Landsman, born in the Netherlands, but long residing in southern Italy. Elizabeth's age matched the revised estimate of the victim. She was a jewelry dealer and, according to records, had purchased the jacket on October 2nd, 1999. Excitement began to build. Italian police traced her last known residence. Neighbors recalled her presence, but only vaguely. She hadn't been seen in 2 or 3 years. The only signs of life came from her daughter, who occasionally stopped by to clear the mailbox. More details followed. Elizabeth's husband, 58 years old, was living in Bologna. Their adult daughter had been studying dentistry in Pescara and was residing in a nearby town in 2001. Every fragment of information painted a clearer picture, and the Italians sent all of it to their counterparts in Germany. Then came the moment that changed everything. Attached to the transmission from Italy was a scanned copy of Elizabeth Landsman's passport photo. When the German investigators opened it, there was no doubt. The face staring back at them was nearly identical to the forensic reconstruction they had spent so long trying to match. After more than 2 years of tireless searching, the woman found on a cold German road finally had a name. The team had achieved what had once felt impossible, and the emotional weight of that moment would stay with them for the rest of their careers. With Elizabeth identified, focus turned to who might have wanted her dead. Suspicion quickly fell on her husband. He was summoned for questioning and presented with photographs of the remains. His reaction was visceral. He immediately recognized Elizabeth and broke down. When asked why he had never reported her missing, he confessed that Elizabeth had told both him and their daughter that she was leaving for good. She had even sent a few postcards from abroad. Ashamed and convinced he had been abandoned, he told neighbors she had died, fabricating a widowhood to avoid embarrassment. Still, his DNA did not match the sample recovered from under Elizabeth's fingernails, and his story, emotional and tragic, was ultimately consistent. Investigators did not believe he was the killer. Then a new lead surfaced. Elizabeth's mobile phone had turned up. It was in the hands of a woman in Francavilla Fontana, a small town in southern Italy. She claimed not to know Elizabeth at all. The phone, she said, had been a gift from her husband. That man was Francesco Alfonsetti. The revelation shattered what little certainty remained. Francesco, already known to investigators as Eleonora's fiancé, was now tied directly to Elizabeth. His wife, living with him in Francavilla Fontana, was unaware of his double life. The truth was even darker than anyone had imagined. Francesco, once a background figure offering comfort, was now the prime suspect. But there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. Not yet. Authorities scheduled a formal interview with Eleonora, hoping her testimony could shed light on the web of lies they were just beginning to untangle. The interview was set for Sunday, January 18, 2004. It never happened. The day before the meeting, on Saturday, January 17th, Eleonora was found dead. According to the initial report, she had taken her own life. Francesco was with her at the time, claiming he had tried to stop her, that he pleaded with her not to do it. But investigators found the circumstances far too convenient. Francesco was immediately taken into custody. The police knew he was lying, but proving it would take more than suspicion. Elizabeth was gone. Eleonora was gone. And Francesco was the only one left to explain what had happened. His version of events was outrageous. He claimed that Eleonora had killed her own mother in Germany out of guilt and shame. He said that her suicide was driven by remorse, but no one believed a word of it. Piecing together the timeline was difficult, but investigators gradually formed what they believed to be the most likely scenario. Francesco, while publicly engaged to Eleonora, had been having an affair with her mother. Elizabeth, after receiving a large inheritance from her father, had entrusted Francesco with 150,000 euros, perhaps as an investment or a loan. It's unclear whether Eleonora ever knew about the money or the affair. By the summer of 2001, Elizabeth appeared to have grown increasingly conflicted. She likely made the decision to leave to clear her mind and end the relationship. She traveled to Germany and eventually met Francesco there on November 1st. The two were intimate, as confirmed by the autopsy, but the reunion didn't end peacefully. Police believe that during that meeting, Elizabeth demanded her money back, but Francesco had no intention of giving it up. In a confrontation that turned violent, he killed her, then ran over her body repeatedly to obscure her identity. He disposed of her belongings and returned to his two-faced life. For the next 2 years, Francesco continued his charade, appearing as Eleonora's loving fiancé and as a family man in Francavilla Fontana. But once the investigation turned toward Elizabeth and Eleonora was called in for questioning, he knew the truth was closing in. In what police believe was a staged suicide, Francesco murdered her as well. Yet for all their certainty, definitive proof of his involvement in Eleonora's death remained elusive. Francesco was initially charged only with Elizabeth's murder. In 2007, an Italian court sentenced him to life in prison. Then, in 2009, new evidence came to light, enough to finally charge him with the murder of Eleonora. In 2011, the court delivered its final judgment. Francesco Alfonsetti was found guilty of both murders and sentenced to a second life sentence. The lies, the betrayals, the layers of deceit had all finally unraveled. 2 lives stolen and a third, Francesco's, reduced to a prison cell where he would spend the rest of his life. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.